Minä voin sanoa. Okay, hey, thanks everyone for joining this session in the lecture series, the second to last. Today we have Mr. Pekka Ripatti from the Energy Authority talking about the policies. But please.
Good afternoon. It's great pleasure to be here, and it was great pleasure to come here by metro because our agency is located in Hakaniemi. Really, I'm working at Energy Authority, where I led a renewable group who is responsible for Finnish national regulation and promotion of energy, renewable energy policy. Besides my paid work, I'm as a docent in energy economics at the University of Helsinki. And this role, I have few lectures, pre-examinated and supervise some PhD and master theses. I have very challenging title, Role of Guidance and Policy Actions in Energy System Transitions. Please relax and fasten your seatbelt. Let's go. I have structured my lecture as follows. After a brief presentation, we look at the European Union and Finland's energy policy, as well as EU's decision-making processes in energy policy. Then I will present most important energy policy instruments using in Finland, and which further details feed-in tariff scheme and monitoring system of biofuels. Is Finland achieving 2020 targets? These questions will be considered after presentation of policy instruments. And finally, we look at European Union's proposals for 2030 targets related to renewable energy. Who of you knows what is Energy Authority? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. We are established in 1995 when Finland joined the European Union. The main idea was to distribute energy production and energy distribution, mostly in electricity sector. That was the main idea. We are independent, even if we are subordinated by the Minister of Economic Affairs and Employment. In addition, we are part of European Energy Regulatory Network, ACER, Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, which headquarters is in Ljubljana, Slovenia. Our number of staff is about 80. Most of our experts are engineers, economists, and lawyers. Our agency is divided into five groups. Market and networks groups deal with markets, and market group focuses on monitoring retail and bulk market of electricity and natural gas. While networks is focused on controlling natural monopolies in electricity and natural gas grid connections. Emission trade group admit emission permits and maintain register of emission permits. Energy efficiency group takes a wide range of measures for energy efficiency, such as contract and audit activity. And our group, renewable group, will be discussed later in more detail. But short presentation of our history. It can be said that we have experienced several energy system transition. Now we can say when we are faced Finland 100, Suomi 100. And before industrialization, wood was burned and ships went through the wind and roads were moved by horseback. And during our industrialization in transportation, steam locomotives replaced the horses and steamships replaced sailing ships. In general, it can be said that our industrialization is dependent on, in one way or another, forest industry, and this can be seen even today. Anyhow, after Second World War, Finland strongly moved to the fossils. When coal, the use of coal increased, especially in production of electricity and heating. Also, the use of mineral oil increased as a transport fuel. This fossil golden era continued until the first oil crisis into the beginning of 70s, when the price of oil fivefold. Society began to save energy and wood energy was found again, especially in heating wherever it was possible. One may say that those years, modern energy system transition was started. And the new boost it has now reached after millennium. And next, some words of preparation and decision making of energy policy in the European Union. Is this familiar issue to you? Okay. In European Union, there are three essential institutions. European Parliament, which are represented by MEPs. There are 751 members from all member states. I don't know, what is the number of Finnish represents? 13, 14. Okay. European Council is represented by national heads of states, and Commission. Each members is appointed by governments, and Finland's commissioner is now Mr. Jyrki Katainen, who is Vice President of Commission, one of the Vice Presidents. President of Parliament is Antonio Tajani, and Council led it by President, who is now Donald Tusk. Commission has a key role because only Commission has right to take initiatives. Jean-Claude Juncker is the President of Commission, and another important person is Miguel Arias Canete, who is responsible for climate and energy issues. Also, Maros Šefčovič is important person because he is Vice President of Commission and responsible for Energy Union. As I said, only Commission has right to take initiatives. And in practice, DG Energy, which is below Commission, is department who is responsible for energy policy. And these initiatives are communications, legislation, and also negotiation mandate. Communications, for example, Renewable Energy Targets 2030 was published during the last commission, Barroso's commission, in January 2014. Legislation are decrees, legislative decisions, and most important, directives. And they are initiatives. In addition, negotiation mandate is also responsible for the Commission, as I said. Such as an example, international negotiation, climate negotiation, where European Union is one party along with other big players like Russia, Japan, China and USA. This slide shows organizational chart of Department of Energy. And please don't pay attention to the details and small boxes. And this department is one of the 33 policy-specific departments of European Commission. And Directoral General is of this department is Mr. Dominic Ristori. This department focuses on developing, implementing of the European Union's energy policy, security, sustainability and competitive energy for Europe. This department is organized into five units consisting of 17 individual units. And when talking about energy system transition, most important units are A, markets, and C, policy, and unit C, where is preparing issues of renewables, energy efficiency, and research and innovations. And next, more boxes. As I said, Commission has only right to take initiatives, and they are prepared by DG Energy. And Parliament's opinion is being prepared by mostly Energy Committee, which will be voted later by the whole Parliament. While Council energy issues is being dealt with Energy Council, where the member states are represented by ministers, energy ministers, like Finnish energy minister Kimmo Tiilikainen. When Parliament and Council have formed their commitment to the proposal of Commission, so-called three-party negotiation may begin. And finally, as a result, is a directive, which is, of course, mostly compromise. Member states will then take care of national implementation, for instance, legislation and things like that. And implementation naturally also applies European Union's own agencies. For instance, in the energy sector, ACER, which is Commission's own agency. And next, some words of Finnish national energy policy. Can we make a national energy policy? Oh yes, we can. Oh yes, we can. But as long as national energy policy and legislation required by the directives have been implemented. For instance, present 2020 targets and RES directive mostly set out quantitative targets. And also, when we talk about subsidies, Commission guidelines on state aid for environmental protection and energy set the frameworks. However, means of energy policy and resources allocated to them are nationally decisive. As long as the energy policy and energy produced from renewables are sustainable. Also, one reason to make a national energy policy is different starting points of conditions to produce energy. And here we can see these different starting points. These starting points are, for instance, the use of renewable energy from certain starting point, and countries' financial capacity, and different natural conditions for producing energy. As you know, we have Finland a lot of biomass, and therefore the use of our renewables is based on in one way or another forest or wood. What was the timeline of the preparation of present directive and its implementation? So-called 2020 agreement was published in 2007, and documents explaining those agreements are presented by so-called white and green papers. Year after that, Commission's proposal was published, and also Finnish National Energy and Climate Strategy, which was consistent with the proposed Commission's proposal. And finally, present RES directive approved by Parliament and Council 2009. And after that, national implementation was started. As I said, present RES directive set out mostly quantitative targets. And European-wide target of renewables is 20%, but each country has different targets. For instance, we have 38%. Why our target is higher than average? Does anybody want to answer? Yes, oh, please.
You had a high starting point and you have a significant potential resources.
Exactly, yes. Exactly, yes. From baseline output of renewable energy in Finland was higher level, and we have better economic conditions than average in Europe, measured by GDP. Directive set out also European-wide target for biofuels, and that is 10%. Still, Finland has set target of 20%. Why? Mikko?
Double counting.
Perhaps double counting is one reason. We have a lot of raw materials, and for instance, forest residuals and other residuals and waste, as well as industry to produce biofuels. And one trick is also that amount, what exceed 10%, can be used when we calculating 38%. That is the reason, I think. Okay, next, Finnish action plan of renewables for 2020. It can be said that our action plan is based on two pillars. First, byproducts from forest industry, and secondly, policy measures of renewables. Share of renewables from byproducts is about 60%. And it is dependent on forest industry capacity and production, so it cannot influence by the means of forest policy instruments. End to 40% can be affected by the means of forest policy, and main instruments are financial, informative and normative. And next we are going those instruments in more detail. Financial instruments are important if we consider euros. Adverse tax, for instance, emission trade system, tax subsidies, which means, for instance, that in manufacturing some products are subject to the lower tax rate. Research, development and innovation subsidies are intended for the initial state of product development. Investment subsidies as well as production subsidies are intended to the commercial stage of production. Normative means acts, decrees, regulations and obligations. And information tools are advising, training, statistics, information system and campaigns and things like that. And next I will present a few financial instruments of energy policy. The main idea of adverse tax, for instance here emission trade system, is the principle of polluter pays. As you can see here in this slide, without emission trade system, the production would be at point Q3. But when the price of allowance is current level, about €6, which is present amount of price, now production would be at point Q2. Anyhow, for political reasons, the price of emissions allowance is lower than required. And in an ideal situation, the negative externalities of emissions would have been significantly higher than the production would be at Q1. And my question is to you, why the price of emissions allowance is at the present level? Yes?
Overestimation of industrial production, that they expected that there was more pollution than there actually is.
Yeah, as I said, an ideal situation is Q1, and we have too much allowance in the market. That's why the price is so low. That is the most important reason.
That's what I mean.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes. So it is quite difficult to cut allowance in the European level. But it's a shame, because this is a very very efficiency tool to reduce emissions. But politics is politics and practice is in practice.
Question.
Yes.
What reasons have led to that we can't cut the allowances? Why can't we just reduce the allowances? What are the factors that are affecting it?
Short answer. We have very, very strong lobbies in EU. Forest industry and chemical industry and all industries which must pay from allowance. Energy sector also. Yeah.
I would say that, well, it's a point and a question is that would you agree that actually the electricity sector, the one lobby who doesn't mind too much because they can pass on the price.
Yeah.
And they can even get
They have
a higher allowance.
Yeah. They have possibilities to move from fossils to, for instance, renewables, wind power and hydro and things like that.
And still charge the same
Yeah.
price.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Assuming the current 2.2% reduction annually of the emissions, so how long would it take to get to the 60 euro per ton price?
I don't know. But good question. Okay, this is an European level instrument, and next we are going to our national instruments. Feed-in tariff and sustainable criteria. Feed-in tariff scheme and so-called legislation concerning production subsidy was published 2010, and our agency supervises and manages this scheme. Scheme is funded from Finnish state budget, and subsidies is paid per quarter for 12 years to producer. And we have four technologies or raw materials in our scheme: wind power, timber chips, biogas and wood-based fuels. There are several technical and economical conditions for applying to the scheme. For instance, the scheme is intended to production of industrial scale and for new investment. For instance, all parts of power plants must be new, and we have also minimum capacity. For instance, in wind power, minimum capacity is at least 0.5 megawatt amperes. When the scheme is applied, we examine applications and then we make decisions to approve power plant to the scheme. With exception of forest chips, each technology has a quota. And for instance, in wind power, quota was originally 2,500 megawatt amperes. And now it is practicable. And biogas and wood-based fuel quota can still fit. Feed-in tariff for wind power, biogas and wood-based fuels. The idea of feed-in tariff scheme to this technology is to guarantee investment for new power plants, and that's why the level of subsidy is quite high. And as I said, producer receive a subsidy for 12 years. feed-in tariff or subsidy is target price, present 83.5 euros per megawatt hour, is minus the average price of electricity. For instance, in the third quarter of this year, subsidy was about 48 euros per megawatt hour, when the price of market of electricity was about 36 euros per megawatt hour. And until the end of 2015, the target price was as high as 105.30 euros per megawatt hour. Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to ask a question, have you found another feed-in tariff or quota-based scheme in Europe where the entire financing of the scheme comes from the national state budget and none of it is recovered from the energy price?
I don't know. For instance, in Germany, subsidy is paid by consumers.
Yes, and as far as I know, in all, so actually I perhaps should have asked it a different way, is actually what is the background, because I've never been able to fully find out the background as to why Finland went for a scheme where none of the costs of the scheme were recovered from customer bills.
Yeah, the original idea was that subsidy is paid by customers, but Finnish Parliament and perustuslaki
Okay, yes.
said that this is some kind of right of taxation, and that's why was made decision that subsidy is paid by Finnish government.
Because I mean, if I may comment, it is, I have argued it is not that optimal in the way that because it's paid from general taxation, the largest consumers of electricity, who in some cases may be those who are just not being very efficient, are not paying the cost of their inefficiency. And as you probably know, the German scheme has excluded large industrial customers from paying the cost of the scheme because they can have their export competitiveness affected. And that, I think, is actually quite a good way, that you exclude those companies who probably are efficient but whose export competitiveness are affected. But I don't see why a large energy consuming household should not pay the full costs of the scheme as opposed to a small one. We might have a small energy consuming household with high income who pay a lot of general taxation, and it's a part of a socialization of the cost of energy, which, anyway, that's perhaps that's more a comment than a question, but it's interesting because I think that Finland might be almost unique in that regard in Europe, and it's interesting the background of it.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining that.
Okay. The system have also a backstop effect, which means that if average price of electricity is below 30 euros, then the maximum subsidy is 53.50 euros per megawatt hour. And now, when we have seen the level of price of electricity, backstop price can be higher. But anyhow, these agreements between state and companies are binding when they have accepted to the scheme. And also, subsidy is not paid for the hours when the market price is negative. But we haven't seen those prices in Finland so far.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Do you know if that in Germany, for example, if they pay the subsidies when the electricity price is negative?
I don't know. I don't know this question. Yeah, please.
Is there any sustainability requirement for this wood-based feed-in tariff? Like, is it allowed to cut the Amazon rainforest and burn it in here?
Wood-based fuel means mostly that raw material comes from byproducts from forest industry.
So that's a rule.
That's a rule. That's a rule. And next slide is quite interesting. And it illustrates the importance of the market price of electricity and determining the subsidy, but also learning and technological development in the reduction of production cost of wind power. The original idea was that in addition to the target price, producer would receive a reasonable return. What is reasonable? I don't know. But as the price of electricity has decreased, subsidies went up and the cost of production decreased. So the Finnish government urged to close the wind power feed-in scheme. And now it is closed. It was closed 1st of November in this year. And the final capacity came 2,420 megawatt amperes. Yes?
Will it open again?
Sorry?
Will it open again? So for some new capacity?
2,320 megawatt amperes.
No, sorry. Are there any plans of allocating some new capacity?
Yeah, there are plans to open technology neutral binding system, but this law is just now in the hands of Finnish Parliament, and I don't know where it goes now. The question: do we pay over subsidy? What do you think?
Yes.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, yes.
Was there a reason behind why Finland chose for a target price instead of a premium feed-in tariff?
I don't know, but this is a very good question. Because when we promote the use of timber chips, then we are using feed-in premium. But this is different question. Feed-in tariff is, in fact, as I said, investment subsidy based on production. But anyhow, quite interesting, and as you can see, the price of electricity is here in area market blue, and area of subsidy is it yellow or what the color is, and because of learning and technology development, the levelized cost of energy has decreased, as shows very recent diplomityö by Niklas Hokka. And next, subsidies of timber chips. Purpose of subsidies to promote the use of timber chips is to promote replacement of coal with timber chips in production by compensating for the difference in cost between timber chips and fossils. And premium changes according to the emission trade allowance and peat tax. And thumb rule is that the maximum subsidy is paid if the emission allowance is less than 10 euros. Then the subsidy decreases as the price rises. And finally, the subsidy will not be paid when the price exceeds about 23 euros. And this is exactly what you ask. This is feed-in premium is paid over electricity price. So what we have? We have 124 wind power power plant and more than 50 timber chip power plant in our system, and their capacity you can see in the right hand side. And the number of power plants of biogas and wood based fuel is quite small. And as I said, the quota of wind power is now closed.
So can I ask a question? What
Yes.
is wood-based fuel in this context?
Byproducts from forest industry, barks and
Okay.
things like that. And the raw material to the timber chips is this raw material is collected from the forest.
That's actually
Yeah, that's different between those.
yeah. Because some people would call that a byproduct.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's not.
It's
Yeah.
quite
Yeah.
confusing. Yeah. And next slide is to all us taxpayers. So far we have paid more than 500 million euros, for instance, to wind power, and this year amount is current situation, and we have estimated that the total number from this year would be about 240 million euros. And as you can see at start, most of subsidy was paid to the forest chips, but since 2014 most of subsidy is paid to the wind power.
Sorry. May I?
Yes,
Sorry,
yes.
many questions. But I think it's difficult when it comes back at the end. It's easier to ask it now. It's sort of two-part question in a way. First one is, did you have an earlier projection of how much this level would reach per year once the kind of market was mature? And is this 200 million in line with the projection? And then second part of the question, because I've completely forgotten myself, how long the prices are guaranteed for wind power and for timber chips, so how long into the future is the financial commitment?
When the scheme was established, then those who were preparing it, they estimated that the price of electricity would be about 50-55 euros per megawatt hour. And now we can say that was little mistake. Okay, But on the other side, what the subsidize and the scheme, what they have achieved. First, emissions have been reduced and renewable energy, electricity has been produced, about 20 terawatt hours so far. Does anybody of you know how much the emission reduction has been paid by feed-in-tariff scheme?
You mean per ton of CO2?
Yeah.
A lot.
For instance, as we know that the price of emission in ETC system is about €6 per CO2 tons.
70, I'm guessing.
In wind power, more than 100.
Yeah.
Quite expensive tool.
And in timber chips?
About 30. Okay. Next, sustainable criteria. This picture describes the question of biofuels, sustainable issue. And this circle covers life cycle from raw material source to the end use. Raw materials from forest or fields. Raw materials must be sustainable and emissions must be less than half comparing to the emissions of fossil fuels. And in Energy Authority, it is our duty to control that this also happens. And it happens in such a way that an operator applies for our permission for sustainable scheme. And then we check, grant permission, and monitor quality management system of sustainability. And in addition, our duties include relevant reporting and exchange information between other countries and European Union, DG Energy. What are the criteria? We have 5 criteria. The first one is emission saving criteria and the rest are raw materials. First criteria means that emission of biofuel production should be less than half as compared to the production of fossil, as I said. Those biofuels that are produced from waste and residuals must only meet the first emission saving criteria, but all other raw materials must meet all 5 criteria. For instance, if you harvest some forest in order to produce biofuels, you must meet all 5 targets. But if you are using, for instance, used cooking oil, you must meet only the first criteria. Anyhow, in our conditions in Finland, only biodiversity criteria of raw materials is a practical importance. And in this case, the meaning is very limited. That is because most of these raw materials criteria are intended for tropical conditions, but not at least conditions of Northern Europe. Refining of biofuels is quite expensive. So my question is why they are being refined or manufactured. Does anybody want to answer or
Because the oil companies have to deliver.
That is another reason, yes. Yeah, two reasons. One is distribution obligation, exactly, because companies have to do so. And other reason is taxation, because there are applied tax subsidized. And as you can see here in the slide, but first, energy taxation consists of three components. Energy content component, CO2 component, and security supply fee component. And if you used first generation biofuels, CO2 component of taxation is 15%. But if you use advanced biofuels, for instance cooking oil, amount of CO2 tax is 0. And amount or weight of CO2 tax in whole taxation is quite big. Here in green you can see obligations, quota obligations, and for instance in this year amount is 12% and it will rise to the 20 by 2020. And when we start, I said that in European-wide target is 10%, but we have our own 20% target. But also I have to stress that we can use double counting system, and double counting system can be used when raw materials are that kind of materials that we can use advanced biofuels. Okay, now we have went through introduction and energy policy and its decision making, as well as in Finland and in European level, and we have studied some instruments. Next we are going to results. Where are we going now? This picture shows gross final energy and final energy consumption from 2005 to 2016. And green part of the bar shows that the share of renewables has grown. It should be also noted that the gross final and final energy consumption have decreased. So, the share of renewable energy has increased more than its volume. And next we look at situation last year with a little more detail here. And this picture shows whole Finnish energy production pattern last year. Total production was 371 terawatt hours and amount of renewables was 127. Which means that share of renewables from gross final was about 34%. And about 40% of end use or final consumption, which is however more important and interesting number because the union monitors its development. And as you can know, as you know, difference between gross final and final consumption is due to the energy transmission and conversion loss. But looking at the next pattern of production of renewables, here, 127 terawatt hours last year was production, total production. About 80% of our renewables is derived in one way or another from forest or wood. 60 terawatt hours or 10% is share of hydro, as well as rest renewables, also 10%. Even if other share is still small, their relative growth of, for instance, biofuels and heat pumps has been rapid in recent years. Also, wind power has been rapid growth, but so it should be when we started almost zero 2010, from 2010. Amount was about zero there. This year, production of wind power will be estimated about 4 terawatt hours. Where is the sun? PV.
I think around 11 megawatt hour capacity.
If you want to calculate the amount of sun you need, my glasses. Yeah.
2014 was estimated 11 megawatt hour. Maybe we still use it.
I can say that even though the PV energy is much about talk about it, its meaning is still in the class of promille so far. Yes.
I have asked this question in other forums that, so as we discussed before, I was in Brussels and lobbying on this 2009 directive, and there was a big question whether to integrate heat pumps or not. So it's an issue kind of close to my heart. How is Finland knowing how much energy is being consumed in electricity by heat pumps, and therefore how are you calculating how much ambient heat, renewable ambient heat is gotten from heat pumps? Yeah, how is your estimation done?
I know your point, but I'm not engineer either. I can answer. Maybe Sanna have better answer than I. But
I don't know how it's calculated in the
yeah, but I have heard it. The amount is about 40-50%.
So, but are they? I mean, the question is are they? Well, perhaps you don't know, but I think the interesting question is because it's a consumption-based device. There's not a separate meter on a heat pump. There is no special production subsidy. No one's collecting the data. I guess that the estimation is done. We know that there are X number of heat pumps. Therefore, that is the. Then you're just assuming some amount of energy per heat pump. Don't actually know exactly how they're installed. Because I'm wondering who's collecting the data of heat pump sales and installations. I guess nobody.
What can I say?
It's every country has the same problem. But I think that Finland, let me make a kind of a comment on it, that I think the other country with a large number of installations, at least per capita, is Sweden, and Finland's experienced a very kind of high growth in the last 6 or 7 years, and it's a kind of an unexpected bonus in reaching this EU target that heat pumps are there. It's not a huge proportion, but nobody actually thought about this. It wasn't in the scenarios that people were doing in 2007 when they were thinking about EU targets. No one was thinking you could include these heat pumps, and then so. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I don't know how other countries are doing it. They're probably just putting a finger in the wind.
But any case, right now in public media, there have been learned very interesting questions between district heating and heat pumps, and I think there is no right answer, but price is talking. Price of district heating is too high because there are interest to set up more heat pumps, and I think that this industry goes very well now. Okay. This is also interesting picture. How the coal consumption has developed. Over past 2 decades, its liner consumption has decreased. But if we think of this issue from the viewpoint of climate, one may ask, is this development too slow? One can also ask whether energy policy is working when we know that our target is to reduce the use of coal. Problem is challenging, which cannot be solved solely by Finnish energy policy, since the use of coal is affected by many other factors. For instance, world market price of coal. Yep. Next, the question between European level tool and national level tool. Emission trade system and between feed-in tariff scheme. How they appear in the electricity market. Firstly, feed-in tariff scheme increased the supply regardless of the price of electricity. And this affects the price of electricity and reduce it. Instead, emission trade system affects the price differently. It doesn't increase supply, but it reduces demand, which affects the price of electricity by increasing it. What can be said here? At least the fact that these systems eat each other's intended effects, which are reduction of emission. What is lesson? Yes.
Well, instead of subsidizing the wind energy, we should just buy a lot of emission certificates and cancel them.
Yes. From the viewpoint of economist, the lesson is when there is one goal, and the goal is reduction of emissions, it is not worth applying a number of means because they eat each other's. That is the lesson. And as I said, ETC works at the European level, while feed-in tariff schemes are national instruments. Another interesting question is impact of wind power on electricity prices in the Nordic market. how wind power production is reflected in the Nordic market. Y-axis describes the price, while x-axis describes total amount of wind power measured terawatt-hour per year. When we talk about Finnish amount to produce Finnish wind power, it is worth remembering how much we produce. And as you remember, in this year amount will be about 4 terawatt hours, while amount of other Nordic countries is much more. So the amount of produced of wind power in Finland is so far, and its effects to price is also low. And as I said, however, we operating in a Nordic market in total, and in total, production in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, especially in Denmark and in Finland, affects price, so that producers have suffered, but consumers have benefit from reduced price of electricity. And Liski and Vehviläinen have estimated that we are talking about hundreds of millions of euros. Any ideas? Any comments of this? Yes?
I was going to make an argument in your former figure that this, it's true exactly what you say, and this, I was involved in a study with Purdue in 2008 before the directive where we well understood this kind of influence before the price depressing effect across Europe of the renewables target. You just took the target and then how it was to be reached was about 7 euros per tonne of CO2. Probably it turned out to be more. And I would point out maybe 2 ideas which have made the situation even worse. On a European level, when at that time I was working for the electricity industry, we very much tried to push that there would be proper cooperation on developing renewables across Europe, so that the renewables were developed in the cheapest places, and therefore the subsidies would have been much lower. But that would have not have solved all the problems, but let's say the wind would have been developed where it was windiest. However, the market impact of that could have actually been worse, in that the market in the windy places would have been really in trouble, and then you would have had to have special measures. But it is my disappointment that these cooperation mechanisms under the Renewables Directive have really not been used, apart from between Sweden and Norway, the only 2 countries who start to cooperate. So, I think it's a European approach. It should have happened, and I hope it will happen in 2030. Then the second point, what has made it worse, or what you could say makes it worse on the Finnish level, is again coming back to this point that the renewable subsidies are paid for general taxation, because were they recovered through consumer prices and consumer prices went up, then at least you might have had an impact on the demand of energy because of the price going up. So it's exactly why I argue that I really hope that if Finland has another support scheme, that is recovered from consumer prices, so that you at least can have an impact on demand. But I completely agree with your general point that one aim, one measure.
The price of electricity is quite general question. If we think price of electricity of households from households' total cost, it has decreased over the decades, and in houses, kerrostalo, where I live, I don't know how much I pay electricity. It's a minor cost of my total cost. So there must be some smart systems which controls the use and price of electricity, so that we could achieve this kind of goals or no, something like that. Yeah. Okay. Do we achieve our target? As I earlier shown, production of renewables has grown, and also share of end use has its share from end use has grown too. And my question is, will we reach 38% target which European Union has set us? Last year accounted for more than 40% from final consumption. And in fact, we exceed 38% already in 2014. When Finnish National Action Plan was prepared 2010, there were very huge ambitious sub-targets, for instance to forest chips. Target was set to 25 terawatt hours for 2020. And now it seems that this target doesn't achieve. Still, and however, the share of renewables from final consumption will be reached. And why? As I said earlier, even though the amount of renewables has grown, the amount of gross final consumption has decreased, so the share of renewables has grown. That is the reason why we will reach our goals. Target of biofuels. This blue line represents the bio share or bio part of distributed fuel for transportation, and dotted line amount of overflow of exceeding the quota. And overflow can be used for the next year's quota. For instance, when last year 2016 the quota, the volume was below the quota, overflow from 2015 was used. And as you can see, in this year there is no overflow used in next year's this year's quota. What do you think about this? Any ideas?
This decline in 2016 is quite kind of interesting. Do you have an idea where it comes from?
Yeah. Manufacturing and distributing is for consumption are different things. Many Finnish companies, or many Neste and UPM, which are our biggest companies, they have exported most of their biofuels because they have no problem to achieve quota. That is the reason. And this quota and possibilities to use overflow from last year is quite kind of trickery, which will be closed by 2020. And after 2020, no overflow can be used. But anyhow, when we are looking amount of refined or manufactured of biofuels, it seems that there is no problem to achieve our targets. And as you can see here, EU-wide target is 10%. Okay, time is running, so let's go behind 2020. Finally, I will present main lines of European Union's and Finland's energy policy for 2030. Commission presented its proposal communication, which is initiatives by Commission, in January 2014, and this is the era of Barroso. In communication was presented European Union-wide level 27% target of renewables. And this was presented as a part of 2030 climate and energy goals for a competitive, security and lower carbon European economy. In the same year, in October, Council confirmed and decided on the goals of renewables as a part of so-called climate and energy package. Just right a year ago, end of October, Commission's proposal for revised renewable directive was published, and next month Parliament and Council will present their commitment from proposal, and next version will be published at the earliest in the next year, and then we will see what is the next version. And when the directive will be approved, nobody knows. But I think that it will be approved by 2019, sorry. And national implementation of directive must be done before 1st of January 2021. What kind of issues are in this revised directive? For instance, there are very interesting targets. For instance, renewables in the electricity sector, which means, for instance, that aim of Commission is to create a better frameworks for renewables. Also, there are targets in heating and cooling sector, which means, for instance, that Commission's idea is to create better conditions for district heating. Decarbonization and diversifying of transport sectors means low carbon fuels and more electricity cars. Empowering and informing consumers means that idea is to take consumers along with energy markets. So far, sustainable criteria is aimed for liquid biofuels, but this proposal said that criteria would also apply to the solid biofuels. And as I said, a proposal of directive goes that point that there are European level binding target 27%, and national targets shouldn't fall below the 2020 national targets, such as 38% in Finland. Also, about a year ago, Finnish government published its national energy and climate strategy for 2030, and this list shows the most important issues related to renewables. First of all, I should say that a strategy was prepared so that it would be consistent with the European Union target and means. Target of renewables for 2030 is share of renewables is up to 50%. There are also targets of self-sufficiency in the use of energy, and this amount is 55%. There are also target domestic use of important mineral oil, which must be split less than half. Perhaps you have heard the Finnish government idea to stop using coal. And also there are huge target of biofuels, and target is 30% without double counting. Target strategy says also that there are target for transportation, and then we are talking about 2,500 electric cars and 50,000 gas-powered cars on transportation. And as you ask, new subsidy scheme, there is also stance that technology-neutral competitive bidding process for 2 terawatt-hours will be organized in next 3 years. And as I say, this law is now in hands of Finnish Parliament. I think I just now went through all what I had to. So thank you. More difficult questions. I have two kind of glasses. With these I can see you, and with these I can see my notes. Yes, please.
Okay, about this new bidding process, do you know anything about it? Like, is there some kind of reliability mechanism that it's not enough to just produce the energy whenever you want, but whenever the customer wants?
Customer wants.
So for example, if you have a wind turbine, do you need to supply some kind of storage capacity as well?
It is based only production, so that producer presents its offer to produce a certain amount of electricity. And then the idea is to select those projects which have lowest price. It concern only production.
So it doesn't matter if they produce in winter or summer?
No. Or how you produce. Technology neutral means wind power, biomass, whatever, PV.
Can it be nuclear?
No, it is not renewable.
So not technology neutral.
Technology neutral, renewable energy binding process. Yes.
Yes, how do you take account like a situation that I heard from the Helsinki region environmental service HSY, that like when they had the landfill and they like recovered the methane from there and also from the bio waste, and they already had the like they made the biogas to electricity, but then I heard that they already had the old power plant, but when the new feed-in tariff was coming, they took, or at least they had planned to take a 10-year leasing power plant to get the price to the feed-in tariff price, and after 10 years the power plant goes away and they keep using the old power plant with no feed-in tariff prices anymore. I don't know if this happened in the end, but do you know if it happened, and is there like some way for you to prevent it happening again?
Good question, and I have to say that I can answer, but really good question. Yes, please.
Yeah, on a European level, it's a very simple question. Is 27% in 2030 enough, in your view?
My view, it's not very challenging. That's my personal opinion. Yes.
Is there some kind of a penalty if you don't reach the 2020 or 2030 targets?
Yeah. I don't know exactly what kind of penalties Commission is used, but some kind of penalty fee, or then Commission might use some kind of transition targets from 2020 to 2030. Perhaps. That kind of penalties I have heard.
What does it mean? This transition?
For instance, if your target is 10% and you don't achieve this target, so-called government system is the process with it helps to operate and manage target, European-wide target. So if your target is 10 and you don't achieve, then you have higher targets for 2030, for instance. But also a penalty fee is used, may be used. We have, for instance, penalty used in Finland. If you don't distribute as much as needed, there is very huge penalty fee. For instance, Finnish Verohallitus, National Board of Taxation have used penalty fee to some companies.
Is it on a national level that if Germany is missing 10 percentage points from their targets, will there be a big bill for Germany?
I don't know. Yes.
I think there's a nice comment actually. If only Verohallitus was running the 2020 compliance at EU level, because then we would not have a problem. I mean, I think that there will be. I will place a bet today that there will be 3 countries at least who don't reach the objectives, and that the penalty will not properly recover the costs they have avoided in not reaching it. But anyway, that's a view.
Perhaps we need united European level Verohallitus.
Yeah, I think if you put Finnish tax officials in charge, you won't have these problems. So that's a good idea. Send them to Brussels, a few of them. I have one more question actually about the sort of Finnish strategy, and actually I'm quite pleased personally. I think I'm quite pleased by the Finnish proposals, because on the EU level we have a very unambitious policy for 2030, and I think the Finnish one isn't bad. I mean, some people will say it should be more, but it's not actually so bad when you consider, as you say, you always have to think, we are just Finland and then there's the outside world, what are they doing? But I hope that the objectives set out are achieved. But perhaps 2 kind of questions within the Finnish strategy. First one is the coal ban. Some people in industry are very against that because they say that's a kind of government intervention and we have an emissions trading system.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I have been rather disappointed by their position, given that I think there is only 1 plant in Finland likely to be still running in 2030, Medipoli.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So firstly, what's your kind of thought on that policy? Perhaps a kind of a personal view on this coal ban. Is it a good idea? And the second question is, what do you think about the balance in 2030 between biofuels and electric vehicles? So I'm asking, it's a bit difficult because I'm asking you a bit for personal views, so, but I'm interested to know what your thoughts. You've expressed very interesting views.
The question of coal first. It is also related to district heating very much. And that is why I think, for instance, some companies are very angry to Finnish government, their successions.
But will we have, I thought that almost all coal, sorry, I'm interrupting. I thought that almost all district heat plants which are coal only and not adapted by biofuels, they will be shut by 2025. And yes, we have plants which are co-firing wood chips, and they would have to go to 100% from maybe 5 or 10%. I guess that is. I was just thinking, we have all these quite a lot of multi-fuel plants.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, I take your point actually. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe we go to the the thing about the
And your other question is quite hot in energy sector now. Electric cars between biofuels. It's in short run, it is reasonable to use biofuels because we have more than, for instance, in Finland we have more than 2 million cars, and this changing is happening very, very slow. So it is reasonable to use at first biofuels, but in the long run, electric cars are coming. I'm sure.
I have a continuing question regarding EVs because was it 2 years ago, 2015, 2014 maybe, when Finnish government did a study on biofuels versus EVs and what should be promoted and what shouldn't. And the government was very pro biofuels, partly because of Neste and their share of GDP. But how do you view the current policy compared to Norway? The transition, we have pretty old cars, the transition to EVs could happen much more rapidly if there was some sort of subsidies.
Since those days, very, very huge wind has gone over us, and nowadays those people who voted biofuels, they understand the need of to promote electric cars. A lot of things have changed during last 2 days, 2 years, even 2 days. Yes.
Actually, the last question I raised is an interesting point. It brings to mind Finland does have a very old car fleet. I think that the car fleet in Finland is the oldest in Western Europe. If I remember, it's 12.9 years, and it's 13.9 if you include those people, so-called museum cars. And it's probably the oldest of any wealthy Western European country. So it brings to mind, actually, I just sort of thought that the new policy which is being suggested of these EV subsidies is a straight subsidy on a new electric car. There have been some, this kind of floating around 3,000 euros or whatever it could be. But it would be much more logical if it was based, you only get it if you scrap an old car.
Mm-hmm.
Because Finland does have that problem of all these wretched old vehicles, and I know the history why it's like it, but
and that
has anybody been thinking about a scrappage?
Yes,
or
yes,
have
that instrument is used.
Is it in the
Yes,
proposal?
yes,
Okay, I didn't know it. Yes.
Very small scale.
Yeah.
But it's small scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yes.
On a totally different topic, I understand now that the EU ETS scheme has been reformulated.
Yes, yes.
Could you describe a little bit of what changes and what this reform will bring to the future?
I'm not expert of ETC, but if I have understood right, the idea is to change system more flexible, so that amount of emissions can move to the phase of, for instance, emission production of such kind of production which produce emissions. More flexible, and if necessary, system can cut or reduce emissions. That is all what I know.
Okay, thank you very much for this presentation again.
Yes. And if you have later some questions, please send me email or comment in Twitter or call me or whatever. Thank you. It was nice to be here.